Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Snap Judgments. This is Randy here, and I am here with Christian Zwick, a guest podcaster. He is a fellow draft professors podcaster. I ran into him on there. We got to chatting, and we thought, you know what? We'll come and chat about the combine for you folks. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to cover the trenches today. Um, Christian, if you want to just take a moment, introduce yourself, talk about your background and where you publish stuff and so forth.
Yeah, so my name is Christian, and been a part of the Draft Professors community now for a few months. And starting to get into kind of brand new to podcasting. Actually, only done a few here and there. But you give me a follow on Twitter. I do some mock drafts and big boards. Got a big board coming out next week before the combine. Handle is at Zwick_Christian. So give me a follow, interact, and check out my stuff.
All right, great. Yeah, like I said, we're going to talk about the trenches today. Earlier, yesterday, earlier in the series, I've done a lot of talk about the combine philosophy and stuff, and we'll probably weave some of that in here too, just in terms of what's important to different people for different positions. Um, but the trenches can be one of the hardest groups to evaluate and one of the easier groups to misread. And they span so many body types because in this, I mean, we're talking about guys all the way from Romello height at like 235, all the way up to, on the other side of the ball, Caden Proctor, like 370, or Markel Bell, 6'9", 360. So it can be a really tough group to evaluate. Talking just about combine philosophy in terms of the trench version, um, there are a lot of things that get kind of press or whatever, 40 times, bench reps, stuff like that don't necessarily matter too much. And it's really highlighted here in the trenches because you've got the 40 times say, but the really important thing is it's 10-yard splits, measures of explosiveness. I like verticals on a big guy. You give me a big guy with a good vertical, and it's like I know he can jump out of that stance quick. Um, and then movement drills matter also. Not the agility drills, but also the position specific stuff. What do you keep an eye out for at the combine? What's important to you, and what moves the needle for you on trench players?
Yeah, it's really mostly the on-field workout. It's kind of abnormal to the other positions. To your point, it's such a difficult group to evaluate because speed, pure straight line speed is not what you're looking for out of the line. You're looking for that 10-yard split. So you're looking for the quickness to get in out of your sets and your pedal, flip those hips, get upfield and just get out on the move. I remember when Jason, they show us every year, it seems like Jason Kelsey's combine workout, and you could see how quick he was able to get out of his stance and pull around and get on the move. And that's how the Eagles utilized him and made the run game so dynamic as long as he was there throughout his career.
Yeah, it's about as legendary as the three-cone shuttle can get, right? um, it's funny. It's funny the small things you'll talk about when you're analyzing this sort of stuff. Um, and what we're talking about, like fast players matter, but we're talking more about quick than fast. That's really, because a lot of these trench players, not just the offense, but the defensive guys, you hear the phrase dominating in a phone booth, right? Fighting in a phone booth, those sorts of things. You're in very limited areas. So you really want explosion to dominate that short area, not necessarily top line speed. You're wanting, you want to watch how these guys move, not necessarily how they run. So we're going to tackle the offensive line first. And, it's tough to lock guys into tackle or guard, right? Because a lot of these guys play left tackle or tackle in college. Then they come and they move in, and it kind of depends on who they're drafted by too. I mean, some of these guys might not get moved in by team A, but would get moved in by team B. But both dictated by, team A and team B's needs, but also team A and team B's philosophies. So, grouping these guys together is a different prospect, but we do want to kind of separate out the guys that are specifically left tackle, the guys we know can be left tackles, and some of the process at the combine helps kind of set that floor in terms of the measurements and in terms of the movement ability, right?
Yeah, so it kind of abnormal this year because the general consensus top two tackles in this draft both play on the right side. Francis Mauigoa at Miami and Spencer Fano at Utah. Um, the most natural left tackle in this draft to me is the other. I'm behind on both Utah tackles, but Caleb Bloom is the one who stands out to me. And there are concerns about his size and his play strength. And I think if even if he hits 310 for his measurement, that would win for his draft stock, because there is, with his frame, there is clear room for him to add some bulk, add some mass, and get stronger. And he's got the athleticism. He shows the ability to uncork his hips and generate power. You just worry about how he is able to withstand against the NFL, where everybody's big and powerful on the defensive line.
Yeah, and it's interesting too because the weight you show up at can tell us a lot about a defensive line or an offensive line player. You look on the one side of the ball, and on the one side of the scale, we have several players that I can think up off the top of my head. You mentioned Caleb Lomu, but Emil Wagner, Monroe Freeling. These are guys that could use added size, and whatever weight, muscle weight specifically, that they're able to put on between the last time they played in college, and we don't know what their college coaches are asking of them either.
Right.
Maybe their college coaches want them trimmed down, and they have to beef up in that few months. But this is really the opportunity for them. They're not even so much training for the 40 like the little quicker guys, the wide receivers and running backs might be. They're training to shape their body the way they want to present it to NFL teams. And then on the other side of that, I mean, Caden Proctor is a guy to me who I have constantly said I'm worried about that guy eating his way out of the league.
Yep.
I mean, a 40-yard dash. I think the only time he's ever ran a 40-yard dash in his life was he heard a donut shop was around the corner. It's his teammates call him Krispy Kreme. That is not a good sign.
Yeah.
Okay, that is a concerning sign to me. And for the record, I'm also a fat guy, so I can make fun of other fat guys. That's how it works. Okay, these are the rules. But like Caden Proctor, it's funny because it's like if Caden Proctor shows up at 340, 330, man, he's gonna go high, I think.
Yes.
But if he shows up at 360 looking sloppy, what have you been doing for the past 3 months? But again, like I said, the other side of that is, Monroe Freeling, Emil Wagner, Caleb Lomu. If they all show up 310, 315, 320, something in that neighborhood, that's going to raise their draft stock significantly, even though we always say, small things at the combine shouldn't influence draft stock so much. Could you talk about why for folks like us showing up at that weight might influence your draft stock significantly?
Right. And just to kind of piggyback on Proctor, the comp I've kind of used for him is Mekhi Becton. And but obviously Mekhi was just a ridiculous athlete, and Proctor's probably not going to, test the way Mekhi did. But, Mekhi, a lot of weight concerns, managing his way out of Louisville, and it affected his career early on until he went to Philly, moved inside where a player with his size, you kind of disguise those limitations a little bit. And I actually wrote in my reporting on Proctor, I would move him inside. I actually moved him to guard on my board, because I think his skill set is, you're going to get more, like, similar to Mauigoa. He could stay at tackle and could have a long career there. I think you're going to get more out of him, though, if you move him inside and just let him destroy defensive linemen.
Now, if he is to drop 20, 30 pounds and his movement skills, because he's got good movement for a 360-pound guy already, but he drops 20 or 30 pounds and his movement starts to look a little more fluid, I think there are going to be a lot of people who try and lock him in right at tackle. There's a lot of discussion between the guard and tackle spot right now with him.
Really, the major concern with him is his consistency, and you can tie that kind of to conditioning late in games.
Yeah, 100%. And so then we get into this kind of next bucket Oh, and Isaiah World's another guy that I'm going to mention too. There's a health problem with him that I just read about. Was it his
Yes,
ankle?
torn
Was it his
ACL.
ankle? ACL.
ACL.
Okay.
Yeah. He's probably out for all the, if not
Yeah,
most all of next season.
that's not good.
Yeah.
Not good. And he was a
I think
player that I was already
World,
interested in.
because I think World's someone who he's got with his traits, would be able to test his way to day two. I think, even though the tape is not as good as you would expect from a player with his intangibles.
Yeah, yeah. I was interested in him because I thought he was gonna. I guess he just didn't get as much better in Oregon as a lot of people hoped he was. He came out of Nevada, and people were reading all his
Highly
measurables, and they
regarded
were
out of the portal.
What's that?
Highly regarded out of the portal.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I mean, like I said, I mean, people, you read his measurables, you look at the frame, and you get all excited. Then you realize the measurables, number one, are not what they were listed. Okay. He was listed
Yeah.
6'8" and 3 and change, and he's more like 6'5", which actually was a good thing for me.
I
The
agree.
taller the tackles, I'm out on those guys a lot of the time.
You get really a small quarterback, they can't see over them.
Yeah, and they lose the leverage battle, and I mean, they sometimes the bigger it's a problem. I actually could go back right. Patriots fans will probably remember with me just a couple weeks ago, the Super Bowl. We had Morgan Moses on the right hand side, and I just remember him watching Devin Witherspoon, and I think it was Kobe Bryant, but a safety just tie him in knots. He didn't touch either one of them. Like, he didn't know what the hell was going on. And he's a bigger guy, and he's a little older too. So it is what it is. But just the bigger, taller tackles, the leverage battles are issues. And man, there are times like at the Senior Bowl, which that's the one aspect of this that I miss at the combine. You don't get those head-to-head matchups.
Right.
But I remember one guy going like right underneath Markel Bell's arms.
Yeah.
And Markel Bell he's a mountain. Mountain. Yeah, it doesn't help when you can just zip right underneath. It's almost it's almost cartoonish.
Yeah.
Like watching someone like Romello Height, go around. It's like I half expected him like tie his shoelaces together on his way by or something like. But yeah, so the mirror drills are important. Recovery, quickness, the ability to bend. You can kind of show that in some of these movement drills. And you want to see, like, does the movement match the frame? Can I make these things work together on my line? Moving into kind of the next group here, though, we've got guard kind of conversions, guys who we think are probably going to move into guard. And they get kind of mixed up with the real guards, the guys who played guard in college, which there are so few of those guys, it feels like to me.
Yeah.
In this specific class, a couple of names that jump off the board to me: Emmanuel Pregnon, he played guard in college. He will play guard in the NFL. Olai Vega Ioane, also guard from Penn State. And
hats tip to you for even pronouncing his full name.
Listen, I try anyway. Okay. I probably screwed it up. My apologies to him if he ever catches this. But then Jaden Roberts, I like this kid out of Alabama. Tell me what you think about Jaden Roberts and what you might be looking for out of him if you see him at for seeing him at the combine. By the way, you're right down the road from the combine. Are you like going to be able to go there?
I can't get off work to make it, but it's Louisville is about a little over 2-hour drive for me. So yeah, it's certainly manageable. It's definitely on the bucket list to go to at some point and check everything out for myself. But back to Roberts. Yeah, remarkable athlete. He's going to test off the charts next week. Really, I just think I like his. I'm spitting over my words here. I'm glad we're recording this. But yeah, I got here listed 6'4", 335, and an 83-inch wingspan from the Shrine Bowl. So
and like a 6% body fat too, right?
Yeah, like he's quick and he's jacked, and like that's all muscle. So he can uncork power. He can get out on the move and get up to the second level. you're looking for the consistency. You're looking for the consistent hand placement, ability to not play as tall to get low so he can anchor down. You're just looking for that, just to keep refine his technique, get more consistent. But the traits are off the charts, and he's gonna make himself some money next week.
Yeah, I mean, that's gonna be one of those guys that people get excited about watching work out. It's hard, almost hard to imagine a guy that's 340, but like 6% body fat. So I remember reading the numbers. He has like 285 pounds of lean muscle.
Yeah,
That's fucking absurd. Okay. Like that is,
he is. Yeah,
I don't even
he
know what
just
to think about
you
that.
you should not be that muscular, that big, and move that well.
Yeah. I mean,
You can tell he's built out of a factory.
yeah, yeah, and it's funny how it's amazing to me. When I was a kid, uh, interior offensive linemen, we're generally like kind of the fat guys on the team, and they kind of hung out there, and it was they were not the athletes that we see from some of these guys today. Is just it's a very different visual than I grew up seeing anyway.
Yeah, with Roberts, you're just left wondering. He leaves so much meat on the bone, and you wonder if the traits are ever gonna live up, or the player's ever gonna live up to the traits.
Yeah. Now talking about some other guys who are likely to convert in or whatever, Trey Zune and Jennings Dunker. What do you think about these guys? I'm really a huge fan of Jennings Dunker.
Yeah,
And I know a lot of people are real high on there are some people who are real high on Trey Zune and his teammate Chase Santos. He's in the guard bucket we'll talk about in a minute, but
yeah, I'll start with Zune first. Yeah, I think he's going to play center at the next level. Really good athlete, but a stiff lower half, which is why you got to move him in probably to center so he can have the most help that he can. But really good athlete getting out on the move. He's just outside my top 100.
okay. And then what do you think about Dunker? Do you have Dunker moving inside, or do you think he's going to stick outside of the tackle?
I'm not sure. I just don't think he's be able to anchor versus power in the passing game to stay at tackle. I think he's got to move inside. But when you get him on the move and downhill, I love his tough, gritty play style. Just he's going to be tough. He's going to be tougher than you. He's going to win with toughness and physicality, even though he may not have the power to overwhelm, but when he locks on and he plays on time, he can create some movement.
Yeah, the player I've been comping him to in my mind for Patriots fans is like a Logan Mankins type, where he's just real mean, nasty country.
Yeah.
That type of dude that you don't want to run into in a back alley.
Yeah, the mullet tells the story. That's a good marketing tool right there.
Yeah, listen, he's all personality too. Okay, that guy. I've seen a couple interviews with him, and he's fun to watch interview. He's a character. He is a character.
Oh yeah.
And then there was one other guy I wanted to ask you about. Caleb Tiernan out of Northwestern. He's a real tall prospect, which historically you often don't want to move those guys inside when they're 6'7", 6'7.5", because no matter who your quarterback is, it's going to be tough to see over them. They get in the way of throwing lanes. It sounds silly when you talk about someone like Bryce Young not being able to have guys that are 6'5" in front of him because he's mini, tiny little quarterback. But it is a real actual thing. And, for a guy that's like 6'7", Caleb Tiernan size, but normally it's not a problem. But Caleb Tiernan is very, very tall, but he's got these short, stubby little arms.
Yeah.
And it makes it very hard to imagine him sticking at tackle. Patriots fans will remember a lot of that conversation from Will Campbell, and they'll remember a lot of the discussion after the Super Bowl and after we watched him get abused by star edge rushers for 4 weeks in the playoffs. What do you think about Caleb Tiernan's prospects in the league overall? Will he be able to move in? Does he have a spot in the league? What do you think?
I certainly think he does. I mean, I'm not sure how he matches up to another former Northwestern alum, Peter Skoronsky, but I thought Skoronski could have stayed at tackle, but was a better fit at guard. I think Tiernan actually, I like him at tackle actually. I think he's got the footwork, the hand placement, the anchor to lock in. You wonder about the length, but I think, and I said this about Campbell too. I think you play him at tackle and you let him go, and if it doesn't work, you got a really good guard as a fallback option. So I think there's really playing him at tackle. There's no risk and some upside because get a cornerstone left tackle. That's the gold standard to construct your offensive line.
Yeah. I mean, essentially, give them the chance to fail.
Yep.
That's what you want to do. And Skoronski is another Vrabel guy, by the way. That was another.
Yes.
Well, I don't know that Mike Vrabel was pulling the trigger on picks back in Tennessee. I don't think he was, but that's who they picked anyway. I think if he was, he'd still be there. But he's definitely pulling the trigger on picks up here. So
Peter Skoronski's made a really good guard, and Rashawn Slayer's made a really good tackle. I think Tiernan could fall into either one of those buckets.
Yeah. For me, Tiernan is not a guy that I see the Patriots targeting because despite the fact that historically Mike Vrabel has shown he doesn't really give a shit about thresholds and physical thresholds. I mean, beyond Peter Skoronski in Tennessee, he also drafted Roger McCreary, who had like 29.5-inch arms out of Auburn. And then obviously Will Campbell last year. And Taylor Lewan, when he got to Tennessee, also had short arms for a tackle at the time. And he was like, I think they were 33, something like that. But he's also said, look, do I care about that stuff? Not necessarily, but I also don't want to have a team full of outliers.
Right.
So that makes sense to me. So Tiernan's not a guy that people on listening to this channel have heard his name a lot, but he is an excellent prospect. He's going to fit great somewhere. I just don't think he's going to, that somewhere is New England person.
And whoever drafts him, he's got experience at every spot of the O line, not named center. So whoever drafts him is going to have their choice of where they want to play him.
Yeah. Which is, I mean, and for a lot of these guys, that's really the ticket to getting reps. That's really the ticket to getting not even reps, but getting on a roster is positional versatility, being able to back up both a guard and a tackle spot or both the guard and the center. Center specific guys, number one, they typically don't have a backup spot in the league. You've got to be able to flex. You're not just going to carry two centers on your roster as an NFL team. But just being able to flex around the formation is a big deal for getting you on a roster, getting you reps on a team, getting you in a starting lineup, and being able to let a team be versatile enough to get their best starting five out there on the offensive line, essentially. But let's talk about a couple guys who we do expect to be interior specialists, if you will, at center. Jake Slaughter is a guy that's fairly high in my rankings. Connor Lew is a guy who was really high in my rankings, and then he also tore an ACL. And it was not a good year for Connor Lew. I was actually a little bit surprised he came out. And then Logan Jones out of Iowa. I believe he was a center at Iowa, and he's going to be a center in the NFL also. Those three guys, how do you have them ranked, and what might you be looking for them here? I mean, Connor Lew, we're not going to see anything. The medicals will tell the full story, and we're not going to see those. But Jake Slaughter and Logan Jones, what are you looking for out of them at the combine that might influence your opinion one way or another?
Yeah, I've got all three graded pretty similarly. I actually had, Lew was actually my top 30 before entering the season. And the injury obviously threw that into a wrench. I actually ended up moving him off my board, just assuming that he would go back to school. So I had to kind of reassess him after he declared. But Jones and Slaughter, I got right around my top 100. But Jones, I want to see him in the power drill. I want to see him take Fred the Sled on a ride because I know he's a good athlete. I know he can get out and move and work in space. I want to see how he works with power. I want to see what's he look like on the bench press. What's his technique like getting in blocks and and generating that knockback. And for Slaughter, he's so spatially aware. He's always in control, always understands what's going on around him, calls out signals, keeps everyone on the same page in the O-line. And he's got a really good anchor to be able to sit and withstand power against defensive linemen. But so I'll be curious to see what like the athletic stuff for him, the 10-yard split, the lateral movements, lateral movement drill. I really want to see Slaughter on the move.
Yeah, I mean, Slaughter is he's such a pro already. That's kind of what struck me and jumped out to me from the Senior Bowl stuff is there were two guys on that field that really jumped out to me as if they were like pros that were at the senior day. And it was Nussmeier and Slaughter.
Mm-hmm.
And it just in terms of the small things, the way the conversations, that I heard that they had or the interactions that they had with the other players on the field, off the field, with the coaches, etc. It's the small things sometimes, but they just feel like they're already pros. And I think that this center class is kind of deep too, right?
I agree.
You got a number of guys who I think could come in and start, and then a number of guys who folks are curious about too, for one reason or another. Is there anybody that I haven't mentioned that you're really looking forward to seeing here?
Jalen Farmer. I'm a big fan of his. He impressed me at the Senior Bowl. I went back and rewatched him. Yeah, that he's going to take Fred the Sled on a ride.
And he's a Kentucky guy.
Yeah, Kentucky guard.
Okay,
just unreal power. I'm looking forward to watching him work out and really see how he moves, because I know he's got the power to dominate in the run game.
Okay. And I know there's there's one last guy that I want to mention here specifically. That's Brian Parker II out of Duke. Now, he gets a lot of comps to Graham Barton, and I think that's a lot of scouting the helmet sort of thing. But he does have similar physical tools. And I've often said, like, scouting the helmet to me is a little bit like saying, like, you can't tell what the book is about by reading the cover. Like, that's the whole point of the cover. But like the scouting the helmet, it's like, of course, these teams are run by the same coaches, right? Of course they go and they see traits in players that they like and they're consistent. And then they go and they teach them the same shit year to year. Yep. So it's like, yeah, of course there's going to be similarities if you got the same system and you got the same guy doing the recruiting and doing the teaching and all of that.
It's going to look very similar.
Of course there's, like, all those Iowa linemen that have come out for years, like, you're not scouting the helmet. That's the system. And it's the same thing everywhere. Now, whether it's good or bad that's a different conversation. But, the point is that there were a lot of comparisons between Brian Parker II and Graham Barton, especially earlier on in the process. I feel like things have cooled off for Brian Parker II a little bit. I know there's still a lot of talk about versatility, but where do you think he sits at right now?
I think he's got to play center. I've got his Shrine Bowl measurements pulled up.
It's about 6'3", 305-ish.
About 6'4" and 6'8", 306. About 9 3/4 hand, 32 1/4 arm, and 78 7/8 wingspan. I see the similarities with Barton. They have a similar style. I just think Barton's a much better prospect.
Yeah. And I think that's going to be the end day. Brian Parker's like the, like if you ordered Graham Barton on Temu, that sort of thing. That's Brian Parker shows up the door. But he's an interesting guy in that he's going to be able to kind of he's one of those guys that I was talking about where it's like, I think a lot of teams are going to be able to see him as a versatile backup you can come in here and you can back up 4, maybe 5 spots, certainly 4. But again, that's exact same conversation that happened around Graham Barton. And then we saw him back up the left tackle spot. So it was 5. That was the number for him. So it's an interesting group and an interesting class. Now let's spin over and flip over to the opposite side of the ball because we've got defensive line as part of the trenches here also. And like I said, defensive line, even more than the offensive line, really spans a lot of different body types. You've got, the Romello Heights of the world who are much smaller, 235, 240, sometimes range from like 6 foot to like 6'5". And then the bigger guys inside who you can get up to 340, 350 with some of these guys. Dante Corleone is a very different shaped player than a Malachi Lawrence, for instance.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
So what's the group that really gets your attention? Who do you think helps themselves the most here along the defensive line? Do you think the edge rushers? Do you think the interior guys that come in there and show off their power, the edge rushers that show off their quickness?
I think there are some edge rushers. Like Deni Denton Sutton's one to me at 265 pounds. If he goes out there and runs a sub 4.7, he's already getting top 75 love. He may push top 50 because at his size and length, he can generate a ton of power at the point of attack. He sets the edge well in the run. But if he shows some good explosiveness in a 40-yard dash, he's got the flashes of pass rushing excellence, just not too consistent. Yeah, still working on his craft. But if he goes out and runs a good 40 time and shows that he's got the explosive element in his game, that he's going to make himself some money. And on the defensive line, Lee Hunter is all right. I mean, he will be a first round pick, but if he can show that he can work at a low pad level and just work out, just have a nice workout, play low, keep his frame down, and don't get too uptight or too upright. He could potentially lock or there's going to be a good chance he works his way into potentially being the first defensive tackle off the board.
Yeah, I mean, I could definitely see that. He really popped off at the Senior Bowl. He really caught a lot of eyes there. And Peter Woods has been very much sliding through rankings. He hasn't done much for himself in this pre-draft process or in the season at all, for that matter. Nobody at Clemson did. It's like everybody at Clemson took a vow to just not do anything to improve their draft stock. And then Cade Klubnik was like, "Hold my beer, guys. I'm gonna tank my draft stock entirely." But we had talked about the 10-yard splits there, and I just want to give folks some numbers to look at. Okay, when you're talking about these little edge rushers, the fastest 10-yard split we have had was Nolan. Is your guy Nolan Smith?
Nolan Smith,
the Eagles guy, 152, I believe, a couple years back. Last year, we saw a couple 10-yard splits that were very good, with Shamar Stewart at the 158 and James Pierce Jr. At 158 also. So basically, what you're looking for from those edge rushers in terms of the 10-yard split time is you're looking for something really good. Is a super elite is like above 155. Real good is like 155 to 160. And anything under 160 is probably not worth talking about unless you were expecting him to be great.
Yeah.
One thing that I do think that doesn't really, sometimes James Pierce Jr. brings it up to me. Not anything related to this past weekend necessarily, maybe. I don't know. But I remember seeing, I think it's just kind of the interactions and the coachability with some of these guys, right?
Yeah.
Man, I remember watching the combine last year, and the whole book on James Pierce Jr. was about, his maturity and his coachability and kind of his personality quirks, if you will. And I remember watching the combine, and it just seemed like the perfect microcosm of everything James Pierce Jr. was, because every single drill he went to, He had to be told like 5 or 6 times how to do it. He did it wrong like 3 times and had to be corrected. And then when he finally did it right, the number was eye popping. It was like, okay, everything about this is a microcosm of everything James Pierce Jr. is, right? He's incredibly frustrating to teach how to do anything.
Yeah.
But when you finally teach it to him, man, is he fast.
Yes. Yes.
And it just kind of,
had a great rookie season too.
Yeah. But then, the stupidity caught up to him. And it's like, there are some of those things where you might hear about, I don't know, but you can see certainly the interactions between these guys running the drills, these guys running the various events or athletic testing events, whatever it is, and the players themselves. And sometimes you could hear it in the coaches' voices when they're like exasperated with telling these guys the same thing over and over.
Yeah.
So I think that's an interesting aspect to watch
definitely.
from this.
Yeah, it's the maturity matters. It really does. More some positions more than others, but when it comes from a draft standpoint, unless you're a borderline elite, rare talent at your position, a la Jalen Carter, maturity and coachability is gonna be a big part of your evaluation. I mean, a draft day video emerged of Laramie Tunsil, and he still ended up going first round, but it felt like he was a lock to go number 1 overall. And then that certain video emerged, and all of a sudden, down he goes.
That was one of the wildest pre-draft moments of my lifetime. I couldn't believe just wow. I mean, and I don't give a shit. I really don't care about smoking weed at all. Completely the opposite. But
even Jalen Carter
to drop. Oh my God. Yeah, for that video to drop like it did, like a few days before oh my goodness.
Yeah.
So anyway, let's talk about some of these power run stopping type of D tackles that we see in this combine and that are going to be at the combine. These are some of the guys that the bench press reps might actually matter for. You certainly kind of sometimes you just want to see them and how they like stack up physically next to their peers, right? How do they look? Do they look physically imposing? Do they look sloppy? Like, somewhere in between there. So take a guy like Tim Keenan III, Caden McDonald, and I mentioned Dante Corleone before as well. What do you think about watching some of these guys go through the drills and go through the physical, athletic measurements, whatever you want to call them?
Yeah.
What are you expecting to see from some of the bigger, slower guys that we're not going to get those eye-popping 40 numbers, but they are integral parts of a good NFL defense. So you've got to stop the run.
You just want to see the power element. You want to see him. You see him or take Fred the sled on a ride. Corleone's one in particular. I'm curious to see what he does on the bench press because he does have at the Shrine Bowl he measured in at a 77 1/4 wingspan. So he's a little more narrow than I expected.
What were his arms?
What's that?
What were his arms? Do you have those in front of
you? They were. Let me double check. 31 5/8. So he's a little small, a little bit of a tweener, and that caught me off guard there. So the bench press will be important for him. Keenan's not that lean, but he kind of falls in the same boat with smaller arms. McDonald, I don't think McDonald has massive arm length, but he just tosses 320-pound guards aside like he's waking up for breakfast and making himself breakfast like it's clockwork. So you see McDonald's got the anchor, the power to control the point of attack and hold down the middle.
Yeah, and just to explain real quick for why I had asked about the arms versus the wingspan for anybody watching, is that they're very much two different things, right? Because obviously your arms are a part of your wingspan, but if you have a narrow for these guys specifically, the hole pluggers, the run stuffers, the guys who need to take up a lot of room on the defensive line, they're going to be taking up those double teams from centers and guards. So when you're talking about wingspan, if he has 31.5-inch arms, but 77-inch wingspan, well, that's the center of his body. We're talking about like the core of his body. Now that's what we're talking about, how much room that takes up. And when your whole game is that you're plugging holes, well, if you can't plug very big holes, then you're not very helpful.
Yep.
So that's why there's a key, that the wingspan is as much a key indicator of kind of length there, or key measurement of length for some of these guys, because these guys, the D tackles and stuff, they're not necessarily getting out there with their wide arms. It's not the same as like a left tackle or a right tackle who has to cover a ton of space, but they've got to block those holes on the defensive line from the running back. We've got a number of really, really physically impressive guys in this defensive class, highlighted by Daryl Jackson Jr. and Caleb Banks. Listen, when they get up there and they get in there to work out, it's time to pop your popcorn.
Yeah,
it's time to sit back.
Yeah,
you're about to see a show.
Put the cocktails away. You got to be locked in and focused on them.
Yeah. What do you expect to see out of those guys?
Exactly that. It's going to be a showing. I'll just read their measurements. Daryl Jackson, 6'5", 328, 11-inch hand, 35-inch arm, 86-inch wingspan. Caleb Banks, 6'6", 335, 10 3/4 hand, 35-inch arm. The traits with these guys are just they're ridiculous. There's no other way to put it. They're just ridiculous athletes who are they're going to put an absolute show next week. But on the field, you want to see more consistency. You want to see their technique develop, because Banks he had the week he needed to have at the Senior Bowl, where he had the ability to dominate. Just, with his injury this year, when he was on the field, he just didn't look healthy, didn't look like himself. But going back to 2024, you saw the flashes where he can be a force and a game wrecker on the interior. And Jackson's more of a nose and a run defender than a pass rusher, but he's got the length and movements and anchor to lock down that center guard area of the offensive line.
Yeah, and it's really just kind of rounding out the bag of tools for the next position coach, next defensive line coach, next defensive coordinator, where it's like, listen, yes, this guy is very tall, he's very long, but he also is explosive and fast and can and so forth, and I think it also shows, there's a level of preparation that you get to see. You get to see how serious these guys are taking it, because at the end of the day, this is the most important job interview of your life, the biggest job interview of your life, and for some of these guys, the only job interview of their life. So if you're not taking it seriously, if you're not prepared, it tells me a lot about your headspace. And that can be much more impactful than 11-inch hands, 35-inch arms, any of that sort of thing.
And
one guy,
if I may, one really quick, Randy, on this note, because Daryl Jackson was one of the players who double duty Shrine Bowl and Senior Bowl.
Yes,
that's another thing that matters. That really matters. That gets the message out to teams that you want to compete, you want to put your talents on display.
Yeah, and when he was asked about that by somebody, I had seen him say something to the effect of like, well, I heard people were talking about I didn't want to compete, so I figured I'd make sure I'd shut them up.
Yeah.
That's the way to do it, dude. Because like some of these guys that set out of these all-star events, some of these guys that decide to call it after a day or two of practice, man, I don't get it. I want competitors. I want dudes who want to be on the field, who you can't keep off the field. But there is one guy in this class that measurements might matter for more than anybody else, and he's not going to get to us in the Patriots, so I haven't spent a lot of time talking about him. He's probably not going to get to you guys there in Philly either, but he is pictured on our wonderful little graphic right here. Reuben Bain Jr.
Yeah.
He has those alligator arm issues, and there's a lot of talk about tweener. And look, I've explained to people on this channel before, tweener is one of those funny words where it can be used as a compliment or an insult. You can either be a tweener who can play multiple roles, or you can be a tweener who doesn't have a position. And there's a lot of discussion about what Ruben Bain's position is ultimately in the NFL. Obviously, a lot of that's going to be dictated by who drafts him, what scheme they run, and so forth. But what do you see for Ruben Bain Jr. in the NFL? And do you think he's going to come in with these very, very short alligator arms? Is that going to be an issue for him?
I don't, because the common compliment, and I agree with it, is Brandon Graham. And Graham's arm length, when he was measured, 32 and a quarter. That would be in 2026. That's major red flag. So I think if, as long as it's not, like Cassius Howell, someone who's going to be, he's going to be in this, sub 32, sub 31. He's going to be a tweener. There's going to be concerns with Cassius Howell's arm length. As long as Bain is in the 32s, I'm good with it. It is not really. I haven't noticed his arm length as much of a concern on tape. It doesn't really concern me all that much watching him.
Okay. Now, and let me throw another comp out there that I've seen not quite as often, but I like it, and it's original, so I like it even more. Melvin Ingram. What do you think about that comp?
That's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, short arm guy that,
short guy,
relatively similar body structure, and
I think Bain's may have a little more burst off the snap than Ingram did, but yeah, that's another good one.
The one thing that struck me about Bain is that it felt like throughout his college career, not just this year, but prior to this, he's one of those guys that he has what movie was it the other day I was watching? I don't know, but he was like, "Are you hurt or are you injured?" And the guy's like, "What's the difference?" He's like, "Well, if you're hurt, you can still play. If you're injured, you go to the sidelines." And it was like, Bain feels like one of those guys who has a really hard time playing hurt. He's constantly nicked up and scraped up and whatever else, but that seems to impact his performance a lot more than it does other players. There are a lot of other players you expect to deal with that. It's like they were talking to Mike Vrabel and asking about Will Campbell's health and Drake May's shoulder and this, that, and the other before the Super Bowl, trying to find stories. And like he said, nobody's healthy this time of year. And that's kind of what I worry about with Ruben Bain, is that when you get to that time of year where nobody's healthy, does he disappear?
Especially when he doesn't really have the traits, the explosive element of his game. He mostly wins with relentlessness, power, physicality. So when you get nicked up like that and you're already a little limited as it is, it takes a toll on you. And we kind of saw that throughout the story of his career at Miami. He was unbelievable in 24 or in 23. 24 is when he had his injuries and took a step back. So that left us in 2025 wondering, okay, which Ruben Bain are we going to get?
Yeah. And the one we got was the one who came out of the gates with his hair on fire. But then it almost felt like he was coasting to save gas for the end of the year, because it's almost like he knows that his stamina is an issue. Mm-hmm. So it's a big red flag for me with him. I'm not entirely sure how I feel about him, to be honest. I'm super glad he doesn't fit our scheme, and he's going to be gone by the time we pick, because I don't care how I feel about him. But one guy who I do care how I feel about is Malachi Lawrence. Now, Malachi Lawrence is an interesting guy for me in this process, because I know he's very raw. He's not a big run defender, and that's fine for us here in New England in terms of our edge rushers. We don't really ask a lot in run defense from those guys. But the thing with Malachi Lawrence is it was always billed. It was like, oh, well, he's got the prototypical body, right? For the prototypical frame, prototypical length, explosiveness, so forth. Now, this is the stage where he shows all the athletic traits. But what I'm curious about is his arms actually came in a bit shorter than expected at was it the Shrine Bowl or Senior Bowl he was at? One of those two he was at. Shrine, yes.
Yeah.
They came in about 33 and a half, and they were billed as 35 plus. Now, 33 and a half is not a big issue, but it's not the elite frame length that you were billed as.
Yep.
So I wonder how that sort of thing impacts you. And do you want to see more in terms of athleticism out of a guy that you were expecting, 99th percentile frame from, or what?
Especially when his weight got understated by about 15 pounds as well. Because I think he was listed at about 260 and he's measured at 247. So
Oh, okay.
that's a bit of a development there as well. So that it makes, because I mean he's a twitchy athlete with impressive bend. You just worry about the play strength. You worry about him setting the edge in the run. So I just see some pretty good athletic testing, especially at 247 pounds, because that really makes me wonder if does he have it in him to add that mass, add that bulk, and become a more well-rounded player who can set the edge consistently. Take our Mason Thomas. He's thin, but he's also 240, but he has the strength. He has the strength, and he's got the technique and relentlessness to set the edge. You wonder if Lawrence has that element of his game in him, and that's something that I didn't see it on tape. He's mostly a speed guy to me, so I'm have to see him kind of lean into that and have a good athletic testing day.
Yeah, and sometimes you want to project, added weight onto some of these guys, but then it screws with their explosiveness, it screws with their agility.
Right.
They're not the same exact athlete. And that's another, him showing up at the Shrine Bowl a certain weight is very different from him showing up at the combine, because the Shrine Bowl was like a month ago. There's
Yeah.
not a lot of time to really like drop weight from the end of the season to now.
Sure.
What I remember is like last year, Nick Scorton and Shamar Stewart
Yes.
both showed up like 20 to 30 pounds lighter than they were at college, which told you a lot, A, about their college scheme and what it was asking of both of them, but B, about how they see themselves in the NFL also. So Malachi Lawrence, you're going to see a little less inference from that in terms of like him electing to be that weight. And that's just kind of the college listing him heavier than he actually was. One guy that I wanted to mention too that we haven't gotten around to yet is TJ Parker. TJ Parker is, he's very talented. He had a little bit of a lackluster year. I don't know what the hell happened to that Clemson program. I've always thought that Clemson program was a little suspect in terms of churning out NFL prospects that they just don't ever quite live up to the billing. Like there's one or two guys here, exceptions to the rule, but the rule to me is like, if you're telling me a Clemson prospect should go first round, I'm probably going to take him like second or third, because I just don't trust that program in terms of developing NFL players. It is what it is. But I heard slightly mixed reviews about TJ Parker down in Mobile also. I heard a lot of glory and so forth sang from a lot of what I would consider now kind of the mainstream draft podcasts, draft sources, etc. But I do have a friend that was down there, and he said he felt like TJ Parker looked kind of disinterested, and there's kind of a lot of talk about that sort of thing with him. What do you think he needs to do at the combine to shore up a first round pick for him and maybe even get himself back? Look, at one point in time, people were talking about him going top 10.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. I just want to correct myself on an earlier comment. Our Mason Thomas weight is 250, not 240. I sold him a little short. Just want to clarify that. But what I want to see from Parker is I want to see the time speed, because his play style is power, but he's predictable. So if O linemen know his speed to power is coming, they can plan for it. But I want to see how quick Parker is. Again, time speed's a lot different than play speed. I get that. But if he goes out there and runs a sub 1.6 10-yard split with a, I'll throw 4.6 240, it puts on paper that there's some speed to work with there.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, I mean, look, 40 time may not matter per se with an edge defender, but here in New England, we saw it all year long. Drake May just running away from edge rushers. And it's like at some point in time, you do got to catch that quarterback. And it might not always be Matthew Stafford that you're trying to sack. It might sometimes be Drake May or, God forbid, Lamar Jackson.
Yeah,
And you've really got to catch that guy. So
yeah,
speed does sometimes matter in terms of an edge rusher. Look, Tim Keenan might not be running 40 yards on an NFL football field, but I promise you that Nolan Smith has probably run 40 yards a couple times.
yeah.
So it's
And
all about the different player.
yeah, and as an edge, you got to hold contain. You got to chase the ball from the backside.
Yeah, absolutely. And not even just quarterbacks, but running backs. Look, you're not just giving up on the play because they handed it off. You're
Yep.
chasing that running back.
Right.
You're chasing that whoever they
How
handed
many
it off
times do we
to.
see a player who appears out, a defender appears, looks out of the play, doesn't give up on it though, and ends up making the tackle, 10 yards down the field.
Yeah. Now let's wrap up with just let's see. Yeah, we've got a few minutes left here. You know what? Let's talk about give me one offensive lineman and one defensive lineman that you would bet on being all right. You know what? Let's do this. On the offensive line, give me one guy that you think will be an Pro Bowl player, and then give me another guy that you think will be like a 10-year starter, but probably never a Pro Bowl player. So give me a high ceiling guy and give me a high floor guy.
So I'll go high ceiling. I'll go my guy Max Ianachor. The guy's a tower. Impressive arm length, good athlete, functional strength. He's just new to the game, so he just needs reps. He just needs to learn to figure out his craft, develop his technique. That he's got 10, 12-year starter written all over in my opinion. High floor, and then high floor to me is Blake Miller. Really good strength, good enough quickness, just naturally tall. So you wonder how, and he can expose his upper half just because he's just a tall player, and it's gonna lead some inconsistent reps.
Yeah, one thing about Blake Miller that jumped out to me is his toughness and he's kind of the Iron Man of maybe college football, but certainly of Clemson. I believe it was a recent episode with Dane Brugler where he was talking about throughout his Clemson career, Blake Miller missed one practice, and it was because of a broken wrist, I think it was. He got surgery that day, and he was back. I don't think it was later that day he was back. I think he was back the next day. But I think he missed one practice. It was a spring practice, and that was it. Other than that, he's played every single snap since he got to Clemson. He's been at every single practice. He's been at every single everything. Yeah. Incredible tough player. That, yeah. Absolute and I think that's the sort of dude that you are going to, the combine can be an opportunity for people like, okay, general managers don't necessarily actually get involved in this process until late in the process, right? Scouts have seen these guys all year, especially general managers for, say, I don't know, Seattle and New England. They were just playing 2 weeks ago. All right, there are a couple other teams that were just playing a couple weeks before that. These guys are doing all kinds of things. So over the past month or so, some of these GMs have just started getting downloaded on draft data. The combine is really the first time that they get out of the building and go see some of these players. So meeting some of these players, finding out kind of, you said tone setter, and that's what kind of set me off on that little thing is you can really get a feel of, I don't want to say aura, but maybe it is aura. But, when you write down, I don't know. Sometimes you can write down measurements on a piece of paper, right? You can write down 6'5", 330, and it looks very different on that guy than it does on that guy. The personality, the aura, the kind of leadership aura, the tone setter, those guys, they really stand out. And particularly in groups like this, you want to look sometimes at these groups on the field and see who stands out in those groups, because these are groups of uber talented athletes. who stands out in a group of uber talented athletes? Because it's easy to stand out at North Dakota State in a group of 100 guys who are going to go sell life insurance later. But can you stand out on a field of all stars
of
full of
equals.
guys who are built for this shit?
Yep. Yeah. I listened to Colin Coward and his quote about a month ago said and he's talking about the Seahawks and their defense. Turn the sound down and just watch it. And you turn the sound down on Blake Miller, and you get the toughest guy on the field.
Yeah. Yep. All right. Well, listen, we're going to wrap things up there. We're at about an hour. I don't want to go too far over. We did a long podcast yesterday. So, look, let's run back again. Just tell folks where to find you. Do you do 1 day a week over on Draft Professors, or are you just on here
Yep.
and there?
I'm on. Yep. So follow along my socials at Zwick_Christian. I'm also part of the Draft Professor community. Catch me on the Mrs. Irrelevant podcast every Thursday at 9:00 on Twitter and YouTube on the Draft Professor channel. And again, new top 100 dropping next week ahead of the combine. And appreciate you checking out the content and interacting.
Yeah, no, hey, we appreciate having you. I really appreciate your time coming in and being able to do this. I would love to get you here on another podcast throughout the draft season. We'll talk about that offline, but I really loved having you here, and I'm sure the fans of the podcast are going to really enjoy it too. Thanks so much for your time. Everybody, go check out Christian's stuff. While you're at it, hit like, hit subscribe, share this episode with your friends. They're going to appreciate it. They all want to know about the combine, guys, too, okay? Don't keep these secrets for yourself. Share them. Have a great day, guys. We'll see you